welcome to episode 165 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford,
Lydia Creech,
Nathan Smith.
In today's episode, we will be doing movies we saw this week in part 1, and in part 2, we will be continuing our October horror series with 1978's Dawn of the Dead. But let's go ahead and get into movies that we saw this week. This week, we're going to be just kind of sticking with one new release, which is the sequel of the, 82 film? 1982 film Blade Runner. It is Blade Runner 2049. Ridley Scott is only producing this one. Denis Villeneuve of Arrival, Prisoners, and Enemy fame is directing it. It comes from a script by Hampton Fancher, who did the original, as well as Michael Green. This one returns Harrison Ford in the role of Rick Deckard, but it also adds Ryan Gosling, Robin Wright, Dave Bautista, Jared Leto.
Ana de Armas, really important character.
Yes, Ana de Armas. But yeah, this one it picks up a number of years after the original film, and Ryan Gosling is playing a young Blade Runner who, I don't know, I guess you could get into the plot, but it kind of spoils like the whole movie for some reason. Pretty much, I guess there's this kind of mystery that's happening, and it's leading him to track down Harrison Ford's character, who's been missing for 30 years. And along the way, stuff happens. I don't know.
They make friends along the way.
Well, okay, there's a new Tyrell. You can watch like the 3 little shorts that kind of explained what happened in between Blade Runner 2049. And like there was a big blackout and people lost all this information, and the Tyrell Corporation from the first one went under. And so Jared Leto creates the Wallace Corporation, and they make these new replicants that have natural lifespans, I guess. And I think there's some sort of
Maybe I wasn't paying attention. I didn't pick up any of
trouble
that.
brewing.
All this information is
Don't worry
technically
about it.
conveyed in like the opening crawl of the movie, but they also made 3 short films for whatever reason as like homework before you
I
start.
only
Like,
watched
I don't
one
have a
of
problem with
those.
that. I don't want to watch homework before I go to the... Just give me the movie. Like, come on. That's such a Ridley Scott move. Anyway, Lydia, you wrote a piece. If you guys want to read it, it's on cinematary.com, but I kind of wanted to open the discussion with you, kind of breaking down your thoughts, because I know you're a massive fan of the original, and you had a lot of issues with this new film.
Yeah, I went in, like, full disclosure, I went in pretty biased against 2049. I don't
That's
feel
100% true.
I don't feel like Blade Runner needed a sequel. Like, there was no reason to return to that world. And I also, just based on how badly I reacted to Arrival, I didn't not trust Villeneuve to handle it well, and he didn't. In my piece, I kind of talk about how he formally mishandles it. The people keep talking about how great the cinematography is with Roger Deakins, and it's like, Roger Deakins needs an Oscar for this. And yeah, it looks great, but it looks wrong. So there's that, which I took strongly against. Villeneuve does not give a shit about genre or like a narrative that makes sense. And so I kind of talk about in my piece how the original functions as a neo-noir and what a noir hero is like. And Ryan Gosling is not those things. He's not as charming as Harrison Ford is. He plays sad the whole movie. This is a sad Ryan Gosling movie.
To be fair, a lot of his movies are kind
Yeah,
of sad.
aren't
Right?
they
That's-
all?
and
Like, he's kind of playing the role that he always does.
that's what I'm saying. But like that's a misunderstanding of what this kind of story needed.
Sure. That's kind of the fault of the director and writer more than Ryan Gosling.
And then I finally talk about how it's 2017 and the handling of the relationship between Ryan Gosling's character and what's her name?
Ama de Armas.
Ana de Armas's character is careless. I don't think Villeneuve cared about it. It exists as kind of like a cliche arc for Ryan Gosling's character, and it made me really upset, and it confused me. And kind of undercut a lot of whatever the fuck themes Villeneuve thought he was going for.
Well, let's start out with the first point you made on the cinematography, because I know a lot of people who are really championing this movie talk. It started with the trailer, but I've really talked about Roger Deakins' work on this. That it's just one of the most stunning movies they've ever seen. That it's just so luscious and beautiful. What kind of define for us what you mean by it being wrong?
Okay, I guess it is luscious and beautiful, and Roger Deakins has a great eye for capturing like texture. I've seen people talking about like in the Wallace Pyramid, kind of the water on the walls and the way light creates these really interesting, beautiful patterns. But everything is too clear. The original Blade Runner is a very dark movie, actually. There are no like bright scenes at all. And a lot of that is practical. They were building miniatures and filling up the room with smoke and like hoping that would look good, which it fucking does. and and to me, Villeneuve is such a cold filmmaker, and nothing about the original Blade Runner felt cold. It felt mysterious and kind of hazy, but it wasn't emotionless. And to me, a lot of Roger Deakins' cinematography comes across as very stark and clear-eyed, which is, again, a misunderstanding of when you're dealing with these existential questions of humanity and the advancement of AI technology. I don't think it's a clear-cut, clear thing that Blade Runner 2049 is portraying itself as.
And in addition to the dimness and the fogginess of the original, those shots are very dim, or not dim, they're very busy. They just have so many layers of neon lights and glass and smoke, and you can just see the streets, it feels like, go on for miles, and the cinematography sucks you into the movie, and you can glean information about the world of the film just through the way that it looks. And in this 2049, it feels like they have gone through painstaking effort to remove any and all worldly detail from the film. Everything is just, like you talk about in your review, it's kind of Appleified, it's clean, it's sleek, it's one solid color, and it all feels like it is aiming to be featured on the One Perfect Shot Twitter at times. Like, we're just going to fill an entire frame with orange. We're going to fill an entire frame with white and put a silhouette in the middle of it. And like, ooh, look how symmetrical that silhouette is in the middle of this totally orange or totally white frame. What great cinematography that is. But it's kind of easy and simple and lazy cinematography, really. I like Roger Deakins, and he does some really good things at various places here, but it doesn't have that world-building quality. It doesn't have that lived-in nature of the original Blade Runner. Yeah, there's no atmosphere, absolutely.
And, like, it's fine. I'm not saying that it looks bad. I'm saying that it looks wrong. And I just knew that this would be approached in the wrong way.
I wanted the one point I wanted to add on the whole look of the film point is that I feel like this is less indicative of them making some type of statement on how the future looks in 2049. I think that was more in the original Blade Runner. I think that they were trying to make some sort of world that was indicative of what it would look like in that period of time. While this one seems much more adherent to how we view modern sci-fi movies, especially in the last 10 to 15 years. You think of stuff like Her and Ex Machina and Arrival, and these movies that, regardless of how you feel about them, they're popular, and that's kind of what people go to immediately when it comes to what a modern science fiction movie looks like. And those movies are very clean, very computerized. Everything feels very, very modern. You have these white and gray palettes. And so I think that's I feel like Villeneuve's not there's no.
It's just playing into the trend.
He's just playing into the trend. I think that it's more, this is what people in 2017 are accustomed to, rather than this is what I don't think that there's any deep thought into how.
And I think that there was.
That's the problem with the whole film. There hasn't been any deep thought into any aspect.
And I think there was some intentionality behind the clean, sleek look of a movie like Her or a movie like Ex Machina, because those are both about what happens when a tech company like Apple becomes the dominant force in our society, right?
Sure.
And this is just, hey, that looked cool. Let's take that. Mm-hmm. You know, and it doesn't pay any mind to what the look of the original Blade Runner was functioning for.
Yeah. So I think we have an idea of how Lydia feels. Andrew, do you care to elaborate kind of on your overall feeling on the movie?
I agree with all of Lydia's points, especially the point about gender and the way that the relationship is handled in the film. We can talk more about that later, I think, and get really into like what exactly the relationship between Ryan Gosling and the Joy character is like. But my overall takeaway is this movie is really boring and really long. And yes, there are times when it looks quote-unquote good in kind of a conventional sense of what good cinematography should look like. But it is just not a gripping drama in any way. There's a pregnant pause between every single line of dialogue. Many scenes that seem to contribute nothing to the film, and many plot threads that are either abandoned halfway through or introduced at the last minute for no good reason. And this movie's 2 hours and 45 minutes, and I was looking at my watch around 60 minutes into the film and just groaning to myself I had to sit in for the rest of the runtime. There were many points where I felt myself nodding off and falling asleep, especially in the scene between Harrison Ford and Jared Leto in the latter half of the film. There's like what feels like a 20-minute conversation between those two characters. A lot of malaise, a lot of drolling dialogue.
I can't believe they made Harrison Ford be in a room with Jared Leto. I bet he hated that.
Well, I think the original plan was for that character to be played by David Bowie, and like what an insult to David Bowie that they would replace him with fucking Jared Leto. I can imagine that scene being very compelling. Just if you're just watching a scene between Harrison Ford and David Bowie talking to each other, just the fact that those two people are in the room together makes for a compelling scene. But take David Bowie out of the picture, and it's just a dialogue scene, and the dialogue in this movie is not impressive or engaging in that way. So I don't know. I just found it extremely, extremely dull, and I've already getting the sense that film critics are being overly forgiving of that element of the movie because of the names involved. They like Blade Runner as a franchise. They like Villeneuve. They like Roger Deakins, etc. And therefore, any time that it's slow or boring, it's really just deep and introspective, y'all. But really, it's just slow and boring. And this was a criticism that was lobbied against. It's a very controversial film, but one of my favorite movies of the year is Ghost in the Shell, mostly because of the ideas of Scarlett Johansson on tourism that I talk about in my video essay. But I thought that was a movie that was unfairly considered very boring when in fact it's exciting and engaging and action-packed. And Blade Runner 2049 is just like 10 times more slow and plotting than that movie is. Yet it is being championed as like this hallmark of intellectual blockbusterism when I just don't think there's a whole lot under the surface to go back to your piece, Lydia.
Zach?
That's interesting. This is the point of the podcast where I'm going to alienate myself.
Go ahead.
I think...
Zach, do not say it's better than the original.
Because I 100% agree, like, with that point that it's just that it presents itself like there's a lot to say and that it's very deep and introspective, and there's all of these different pistons going that just blow you away. And, I kind of feel the same way about the first one too. Like I think that these are both movies that think that they're very smart, that at the end of the day are just fine, that they pose a lot of these existential questions about humanity they don't really answer them. They just think that by posing them that's something, you know, that elevates them to some other level. And I feel like this is kind of, the 2049 is very similar to the first one in that respect. I guess the first one does a better job of handling it. I don't really think so. I don't think that Ridley Scott's smart enough really to handle a lot of these things. And you can maybe point out maybe I'm wrong, and you can explain what I'm missing. But I mean, I rewatched the first one, and then I just like it has fine parts, but I just think it's this movie that is. It's not as smart as it thinks it is, and this one is 100% that, but ramped up to 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is a very poor choice in runtime. It's a movie that very very much knows what it wants to be, and it wants to be this groundbreaking, this, you know, blockbuster that's kind of cutting its own mold. And I don't think that it has it has the technical prowess, but it just doesn't have a lot of the emotional beats that and emotionality that Villeneuve's previous stuff, and not just Arrival, but in Prisoners and Enemy. It has these really smart those movies have these really intelligent moments about, you know, humanity and other elements that I think that this is why when he was announced as the Blade Runner 2049 director, it made sense. Yeah. But this one I don't think is ever interested in engaging in these ideas. It's interested in presenting them and then kind of casting them aside to go to the next idea. You mentioned the hologram wife character of Ryan Gosling, and she's there, and you kind of have these scenes with her.
We should probably explain what exactly that relationship is like, because we passed over to the beginning.
Yeah, it's pretty much that they developed this technology, and correct me if I'm wrong, they developed this technology where it's kind of almost a personal AI in the vein of, if you've seen the movie Her, where he has this personal AI who he's constantly engaging with, and in Blade Runner it's pretty much a similar thing, but she can also hologram herself into a body kind of, and initially she's restricted to only his apartment and can kind of move and go around that space, but then he brings back this adapter device that allows her to go anywhere with him. And so they introduce this relationship, and
because of course he's in love with her.
Sure.
It's so fucking
and
gross.
She will transform into a multitude of fetish outfits, whether it be schoolgirl or what's the name of the
it's the dress that Maggie
Chung wears in The Mood for Love.
But it's like Asian fetishization.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, they introduced this plot point, and I don't know. Maybe I'm just this is coming from my manness. I don't know. But like I couldn't get that worked up about that, because it was a plot device that kind of was introduced, and I recognize all of the wrongness in this relationship, but then the relationship just dissipated. So it was like, well, how meaningful was this thing in the first place? Because she goes away, and then it's kind of it. We never.
I mean, that's the problem with it.
Sure, yeah.
And the whole film is just lousy with boobs. You know, there's just so many boobs filling up
a lot of tits in this movie.
There's Ryan Gosling walks into the desert, and there are two giant statues of boobs for no reason. It's just Villeneuve decided to put them in there, and I had to navigate this question of like objectified women when I was writing my video essay on Scarlett Johansson, and I think that a lot of her movies take the lousy with boobs. Andrew Swart for 2017. Nathan is texting. A lot of her movies play up the idea of women turned into objects because of their beauty, but it questions that and it problematizes it. And in this movie, it just seems to be there. And they have all of the material they need to expand the universe of Blade Runner, where you're always asking questions about what is the line between humans and technology and humans and object. You could expand that question to encompass, well, how do men engage with women and things that are like simulations of women that speak to some way in which we already are blurring this line, but they don't actually approach that question.
They just play it straight.
They just play it straight. And when, spoiler alert, the relationship does not work out between the AI and Ryan Gosling. And when it does,
it kind of gets squashed.
Yeah, but when it does, it's like, oh, that's so sad for Ryan Gosling. He has to fuck his computer. Like, that's the end.
I don't know. It's just such a underwritten, poorly written plot. It just floats away. Like it goes into that same category as a lot of the other questions that the movie's posing, and kind of it's posed, and you're like, oh, okay, are we going to engage with this? It's like, no,
I will say.
The next one.
And that's a problem, though, right? Like, that's not what Blade Runner should be. Because, I talk about this in my piece. The original Blade Runner is, violence towards women, and it's disturbing, but it's actually presented and as disturbing, maybe not on purpose.
The sexy saxophone kind of makes it seem like it's not being played as disturbing, but you can definitely read it as disturbing.
And this just doesn't read as anything other than joy is a support for Ryan Gosling's character, and that's not questioned. And I've seen people trying to defend this online, like, oh, of course the future is sexist, and like we are meant to notice that she's programmed to fulfill his every wish. And I'm like, no, we're not, because it's not. There's no empathy for her.
It's presented in an entirely positive light. The relationship.
I think she also has to be a character to have any empathy pushed toward her.
I think that
right. But there's no empathy for any of the women characters in this film either, and it's disturbing to me, like as a viewer.
There's a scene that I think is very emblematic of the gender issues in this movie, where it's essentially a replaying of the scene in Her, where Scarlett Johansson's character Samantha hires a prostitute to like serve as a body surrogate so that she can have sex with Joaquin Phoenix's character. The exact same thing happens in Blade Runner 2049. And I don't quite know how I'm supposed to react to that scene. I found it profoundly gross, but I did not think the film wanted me to think it was profoundly gross. And regardless of what the tone and what the framing of that thing is, in the scene in Her, it is played as profoundly emotionally complicated for every person involved. Even though there's like a lot of consent and in terms of like how they negotiated this arrangement, everyone feels a little conflicted about it. And in the Blade Runner scene, nobody actually has emotions and nobody has a personality or a character.
No one's very conflicted.
Therefore, there can't be any emotional complication in the weirdness of that scene.
The whole thing about that scene bothers me too, is because they're all not humans. Spoilers.
Question mark.
No, Mackenzie Davis that's her name, right? The actress. She's a replicant. She's a pleasure model replicant. She shows up at the Replicant Rebellion, whatever the fuck. The
question mark is for Ryan Gosling, because the whole movie is a spoiler whether or not he actually is a robot.
I think he's a replicant.
Well, the last point I want. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, But why? Why do we have these three? Recreating gender and sexual dynamics that humans have when they have no reason to be doing that. No, I'm serious. Ryan Gosling doesn't even have a survival drive. At the very beginning, he's talking to David Bautista, and he's like, the difference between you and me is I don't run when people come to kill me for my malfunctioning. If you don't have self-preservation, why would you have sexuality?
Yes.
The last question I kind of wanted to ask is, and I'm taking this from the review of this movie by K. Austin Collins in The Ringer. And this is not just the fault of Blade Runner. I think that this is kind of the fault of a lot of science fiction movies from the last 5 or so years that deal with artificial intelligence. It seems like the goal of artificial intelligence, of AI, is constantly to be, they're always curious about what it means to be human. There's always this kind of quest to understand what humanity is. And I kind of want to, like, is that really an interesting, why would they want to be humans? We kind of suck. We're not these great beings. I don't understand. And so I think that it's just kind of boring that it's anytime we're dealing with AI, we're never questioning anything interesting. It's just they're always questioning their humanity. I think that I feel like they could be much more of a vessel to question a lot of other different avenues, and we've just kind of dictated ourselves to this one lane. And I think I agreed with what the points that he made in his review. It was just it's just kind of boring, and and that's what I felt watching 2049. A little bit of the original Blade Runner is I don't find this, what does it mean to be human, all that interesting. I think that there's other things that you could use artificial intelligence to explore, and I don't know. This is just more, kind of a thing with just the whole genre at large. I think that, but I don't know if you guys had that issue or at all.
It's at least not interesting in the way that they're posing it, and I do agree with you, Zach, that the movie poses questions without necessarily answering them, and that makes for an uninteresting experience after the fact. But I disagree with your assessment of the first one, which is that the 2049 is basically just rehashing the exact same questions the first one asked, and regardless of your feelings on whether or not the movie answers those questions, at least the first one asked the questions and did so in an original way, in a way that had not been done before that movie. This is just a retread that offers no real addition to the original.
I guess, but is that better to ask the question and not answer it, or that just seems annoying?
Yeah. A small change that annoyed me, which I think gets at your point, Zach, and what's not interesting, is they changed the Tyrell Corporation logo. The Mackenzie Davis character says it to more human than humans with an S on the end. And, I think if replicants are just recreating, shitty human society and, being shitty to each other, then it's just this weird tribalism thing, and it doesn't matter if there's a difference. Whereas in the original, it's you might find this boring, but to me, it's this transcendent, sort of more human than human kind, And it's just, how do you fundamentally misread that?
And a lot of the Johansson sci-fi movies, as well as 2001: A Space Odyssey, those are about technology transcending outside of the realm of what they were originally used for, as opposed to devolving themselves back to the realm of humanity. It's again, why would you actually want to do that?
Well, yeah, I don't. That makes sense to me.
Because all the OSs in her leave the planet. They're this is bullshit. We're gone.
I will say as my last point that Lydia came into this movie at wanting to dislike it and not being a fan of Villeneuve in general. I went into this with high hopes because I have liked every Villeneuve movie I've seen up to this point. I don't necessarily know what his auteurist slant is. I can't quite tell what the Villeneuve style is or what his thematic concerns are, but personally, I think that Enemy is one of the best films of the 21st century, and I've quite enjoyed everything else that he's put out. And when I walked into this and walked out just profoundly bored, I was disappointed. I wasn't, happy that my biases were validated.
All right. Blade Runner 2049. It is in theaters now.
Skip it.
But yeah, if you want to read or at least see more expansion on some of the things that Lydia was talking about, her review is on cinematary.com. We're going to take a short break. We will be talking 1978's Dawn of the Dead after this. Stick around.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Andrew Swafford with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money, and we don't want to place ads in the show at this time. That's not why we do this. We do it because we enjoy each other's company and because we want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema. However, there are a few things you can do to help out the show that we would greatly appreciate. Firstly, leave us a review on iTunes, preferably a positive one, because the algorithm gods tell us that reviews increase our podcast exposure. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send an email to cinematary@yahoo.com so that we can hear from you guys for a change. Maybe you think I'm an idiot for not liking Singing in the Rain, or maybe you have a suggestion of a movie that you really want to hear our opinion on. Regardless, let us know your thoughts, and we'll read them out and respond to them on future episodes of Cinematary. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think would enjoy listening to and participating in our film discussions we bring to you guys every week. So to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, and share with your friends and family. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
Episode 165 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our October horror series with 1978's Dawn of the Dead. It was written and directed by George Romero, rest in peace. In the film, a phenomenon of unidentified origin has caused the reanimation of the dead who prey on human flesh. David Emge? Is it Emge?
I don't know.
I was trying to figure that out earlier. Ken Foree, Scott Reiniger, and Galen Gross star as survivors of the outbreak who barricade themselves inside a suburban shopping mall amid mass hysteria. It was written by Romero in collaboration with the Italian filmmaker Dario Argento. Connection if you listened to our Suspiria episode 2 weeks ago. It was the second film made in Romero's Living Dead series, but contains no characters or settings from Night of the Living Dead, the first film. The history of Dawn of the Dead began in 1974 when Romero was invited by friend Mark Mason of Oxford Development Company to visit the Monroeville Mall, which Mason's company managed. After showing Romero hidden parts of the mall during which Romero noted the bliss of the consumers, Mason jokingly suggested that someone would be able to survive in the mall should an emergency ever occur. With this inspiration, Romero began to write the screenplay for the film. By chance, word of the sequel reached Italian director Dario Argento, a fan of Night of the Living Dead and an early critical proponent of the film. Argento was eager to help the horror classic receive a sequel. He met Romero and producer Richard Rubinstein, helping to secure financing in exchange for international distribution rights. Argento invited Romero to Rome so he would have a change of scenery while writing the screenplay. The two could also then discuss plot developments. Use of an actual open shopping mall during the Christmas shopping season caused numerous time constraints. Filming began nightly once the mall closed, starting at 11 p.m. and ending at 7 a.m. when automated music came on. As December arrived, the production decided against having the crew remove and replace the Christmas decorations, a task that had proved to be too time-consuming. And so filming was shut down during the last 3 weeks of the year to avoid the possible continuity difficulties and lost shooting time. Production would resume on January 3rd of 1978. During the break in filming, Romero took the opportunity to begin editing his existing footage. By using numerous angles during the filming, Romero allowed himself an array of possibilities during editing, choosing from these many shots to reassemble into a sequence that could dictate any number of responses from the viewer simply by changing an angle or deleting or extending portions of scenes. This amount of superfluous footage is evident by the numerous international cuts, which in some cases affects the regional version's tone and flow. According to the original screenplay, Peter and Francine were to kill themselves. Peter by shooting himself, and Francine by sticking her head into the path of the rotating main helicopter blades. The ending credits would run over a shot of the helicopter blades turning until the engine winds down, implying that the two would not have gotten far if they had chosen to escape. During production, it was decided to change the ending. Much of the lead-in to the two suicides remains in the film, as Francine leans out of the helicopter upon seeing the zombies approach, and Peter puts a gun to his head, ready to shoot himself. An additional scene showing a zombie having the top of his head cut off by the helicopter blades was included early in the film. Romero has stated that the original ending was scraped before being shot, although behind-the-scenes photos show the original version was at least tested. The head appliance made for Fran's suicide was instead used in the opening SWAT raid, made up to resemble an African-American male and blown apart by a shotgun blast. The makeup for the multitudes of extras in the film was a basic blue or gray tinge to the face of each extra. Some featured zombies who would be seen close-up or on screen longer than others, had more time spent on the look. Many of the featured zombies became part of the fanfare with nicknames based upon their look or activity, such as Machete Zombie, Sweater Zombie, and Nurse Zombie. Sweater Zombie, Clayton Hill, was described by a crew member as, quote, one of the most convincing zombies of the bunch, citing his skill at maintaining his stiff pose and rolling his eyes back into his head, including heading down the wrong way in an escalator while in character.
Yes.
The film's music varies with Romero's and Argento's cuts. For Romero's theatrical version, musical cues and selections were chosen from the DeWolf Music Library, a compilation of stock music scores and cues, while for Argento's international cut, he used Goblin extensively. Argento, who received a credit for original music alongside Goblin, collaborated with the group to get music for his cut of the film. Romero used 3 of their pieces in the theatrical release version. The Goblin score would later find its way onto a Dawn of the Dead inspired film, Hell of the Living Dead. The version of Dawn released on video in the mid-90s under the label Director's Cut does not use most of the Goblin tracks, as they had not been completed at the time of that edit.
Do we have any idea what version we were able to see? I mean, there were a lot of Goblin tracks in mine, but I think that...
How long was your version?
2 hours, 20 minutes.
That is the can cut.
Which means that that's the Argento cut.
No, it's not the Argento cut. The Argento cut is shorter. The can cut was like essentially the work print that showed at the Cannes Film Festival. That is at least my understanding. And it has the mixture of Goblin and library music. So like the like kind of circus music that plays at the end is not in the theatrical version.
What did everybody want?
Mine had circusy music, which I loved.
Yeah. If it was like 2 hours, if it was over 2 hours, then it was the can cut is what I think. Or
so nobody saw the theatrical cut that had just stock music, I assume.
I mean, this one has a mixture of Goblin and stock music, but I think the theatrical has only stock music, right? I don't know. I was reading about it, and I guess it's like this longer one is listed and marketed as Romero's director's cut, but it's not actually his preferred version. Which I'm like, I don't know why you would have Goblin record this soundtrack and then like that's not your preferred version.
So his preferred version has no Goblin in it. What the fuck?
Or maybe I'm getting it mixed up. I don't know. It was kind of confusing, but I feel like I remembered that being the case from what I read.
Sorry to interrupt the fact sheet saying. Go ahead.
Okay. No, we just have a few things. Pauline Kael on the movie, she said, in contrast to the, quote, truly frightening Night of the Living Dead, quote, you begin to laugh with relief that you're not being emotionally challenged or even affected. Dawn of the Dead is just a gross out. The New York Times said, some people hate musicals and some dislike westerns, and I have a pet peeve about flesh-eating zombies who never stop snacking. Accordingly, I was able to sit through only the first 15 minutes of Dawn of the Dead, which Mr. Romero directed in black and white in 1968. Since then, he has discovered color. Perhaps horror movie buffs will consider this an improvement. In 1979, Roger Ebert said, Dawn of the Dead is one of the best horror films ever made, and as an inescapable result, one of the most horrifying. It is gruesome, sickening, disgusting, violent, brutal, and appalling. It is also, excuse me for a second while I find my other list, brilliantly crafted, funny, droll, and savagely merciless in its satiric view of the American consumer consumer society. Nobody ever said art had to be in good taste.
So did the New York Times reviewer only watch the first 15 minutes of the movie?
It seems
Before
so.
they got to the mall?
I guess.
Because-
Yeah, the mall happens at minute
That's-
35.
Oh my god.
But yeah, so I think let's go ahead and kind of talk about the film at large. Lydia, what was your perception of Dawn of the Dead? Had you seen it before?
No, it was my first time
Okay.
seeing it. I'd seen Night of the Living Dead before and, thought it was amazing. It's that great ending. And this one was just so much more fun and really leaned, because Night of the Living Dead kind of ends with the main character being mistaken for, I'm spoiling it, zombie and shot, but it's also kind of heavily implied it's for racist reasons. And Dawn of the Living Dead just kind of leans right into that right from the beginning, and it's amazing. It's not amazing, just it's horrible, but at a certain point it's zombies aren't the bad guys. It's always the people that are left over at the end are actually scarier to me than just poor sad zombies.
Yeah,
they just want to hang out at the mall.
At the one point when they're flying in the helicopter and they're leaving Philadelphia and they're going over the country, and you have this band of redneck people walking around with guns,
So
just
good.
just plowing through zombies.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So no, I thought it was hilarious and sad, and it had some really I gave it 5 stars on Letterboxd, and I don't usually rate things, so there's that.
That gives you an idea.
All right. Nathan, what about you?
So, one of my initial thoughts while watching this movie is I knew that this movie and Assault on Precinct 13 by John Carpenter had both been really big influences on Bertrand Bonello, who directed Nocturama, which is my favorite movie this year. And that movie is also set in a mall, and after watching Dawn of the Dead, I'm I kind of like Nocturama a little bit less, because I hadn't seen Dawn of the Dead before, and I hadn't seen any Romero before, which is kind of I'm kind of embarrassed by that. But I don't know. It basically says a lot of the things that Nocturama says, but in a way that is both more direct and more subtle, because it's not sort of the main driving force of the film. You have this really interesting social critique that's just, you could probably find it in the whole movie, but every once in a while a character will say something like, maybe, they're drawn here and because something in their life, that some memory that they've held on to tells them to come to the mall and to go to this shiny place. And so, it has that interesting critique. And there's also a lot of the zombies, I feel like some of them kind of also embody this critique. Not specifically or entirely a consumerist critique. There's the Hare Krishna zombie, which was my favorite character in the movie, and I thought it was really funny, which I guess is, could be kind of, maybe this is lazy but could be seen as people in this, this being made in the mid-70s, it could be kind of a way of saying a lot of people have sort of, in an attempt to replace other ideologies, have started blindly following new ideologies and have kind of turned into zombies of another type. But it's also just at the same time, it's both very funny, very gruesome in kind of the way that, at least personally, I like horror movies to be gruesome, because I don't really I find myself more and more interested in practical gore and blood and sometimes wanting to watch that, but I only like it when it's not really trying to pretend that it's very real, which is something that I sort of like about this movie. Even though it is scary in parts, it's very disconnected from reality. And it's also just super well crafted as a thriller too. That is in this space that both sets limits on the possibilities of the screenplay, because it is largely in this confined space, but that also affords a lot of possibility and potential for creative invention, just because you have all of these different stores and different products in the mall and different types of people in the mall who have turned into zombies. And so I don't know, it's there's a lot going on here. I think maybe more than I knew that people really like Romero and have a lot of respect for him, but I wasn't exactly expecting this to be the masterpiece that I kind of feel like it is. I was sort of just expecting a zombie movie
and it's operating completely within genre, which is one thing that I prefer about this to something like Nocturama, which is making a lot of the same points and using the same settings and the same concepts in a lot of ways. But that movie, for me, left me a little cold because it's just this abstract, bland art house, like European art house style that is trying to distance itself from any genre trappings. And Romero is able to convey his social critique entirely through the things that people go to the movies for.
One of the other, I don't know if this is like massively creative, but this is the first takeaway I kind of had watching this movie, is that it picks up in media res. You don't have. I was thinking about this because I was just imagining, if Christopher Nolan was directing this movie, we'd have to sit through 45 minutes of him explaining, of an explanation of this, like why people are zombies. This is the outbreak. This is the infection. This is how it started, and not just him, but I would say 95% of Hollywood directors today, we would have to sit through, just this 20 to 30 minute exposition, to establish what. And
all we have to see is a chaotic newsroom.
Yeah, there's a chaotic,
and people arguing.
Exactly, and then you pick up with the zombies, but you have this chaos in the newsroom, and then they kind of go out into the city, and once you start seeing the zombies, you know what the issue is. There's zombies out there. This is what's happening. I don't.
Who cares how it started? There are zombies.
Who gives a shit about because and so I was thinking, like, this movie kind of feels like it's like the third act of what a movie that would come out in the theaters today would be.
But then they have 2 hours and 20 minutes of it.
And so that's what's interesting, is that it's the third act, but then it continues on. Mm-hmm. And so it's able to explore. It a lot of the stuff felt fresh and novel to me because it was exploring what we wouldn't have been able to see because they would have ended it so much earlier.
Though I think that the movie is enhanced if you've seen Night of the Living Dead before you watch Dawn of the Dead, because even though this is not carrying over from the plot or the characters of that movie, like Lydia pointed out, it ends with extreme violent racism and something that is akin to today's police brutality. And Dawn of the Dead picks up with police brutality. And I think, before watching this movie, I thought that Poltergeist was probably the most American horror movie ever made. And I think that maybe Dawn of the Dead might be the most American horror movie ever made. It just walks through all of these quintessential American things/problems. Like, we open with cops violently infiltrating a housing project full of blacks and Puerto Ricans. Then we have our protagonists flying away in a helicopter and stopping in like rural redneck country and being bombarded with like hunters. And then we find our way in.
I love that scene because that is so true to life. That there are the people.
These people
are ready. People who are like ready for the zombie apocalypse. They're like,
they're not just ready though. They're like having a good time, like in the field, drinking some beers, taking pot shots at zombies. They've been
waiting for this day, and they're like gleefully enjoying it. And then we go from there to the mall, and a mall that doesn't look very different from a mall with living people in it, just people kind of mindlessly wandering through the place. And then we end by, before we get to the end, the characters create this quasi-nuclear family where, like, they make dinner for each other and sit down and watch television and things like that. And then that order is interrupted by the chaos of what is subtly alluded to as a Nazi biker gang. Did you guys see the SS symbol on that guy's helmet?
Yeah.
I feel like if I was not watching this on a big screen, I would not have noticed that. But yeah, the biker gang that infiltrates the mall at the very end are Nazis. So that felt a little bit more American watching in 2017 than it probably would have in the 1980s.
I think, too, to go back to the point about it opening in media res and opening in this studio, is that it situates sort of the breakdown of society as a breakdown of media and mediated images. And it's like, once there is nobody really to, even though we see throughout the film that somehow this TV station is still running, and there's like radio broadcasts and stuff. So obviously information is getting out there, but it's...
And two of our main characters are news people.
So we
have news people and cops as our protagonists.
It opens up this idea that it's like once there's nobody who can keep the TV stations going and nobody who can, there's no news or information being disseminated because people have to get out and can no longer sit there and like run things and put information out there. It's like that's when everything really starts to break down, is when we don't have information or data or these mediated images anymore. So it's like I just finished reading for a class Nova Express by William Burroughs, one of his cut-up novels. And basically the thesis of that book is that images are junk, and we are all junkies addicted to these mediated images. And the only way to get off of that is to just cut everything up and just destroy the structure and of the novel. And I feel like in a similar way, it's drawing this line between the pull of the commercial shopping center to kind of the pull of images. And it's like where these are both places or things are these like beacons of light extending out to the world that just draw us in, and we can't really escape from them and become these slow moving zombies, which that's another thing too, is the slow moving zombie I find much more interesting than fast zombies.
Oh, totally.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about kind of how Romero constructs the zombies. Like you mentioned, that they're very slow moving. But there's something almost a little charming about the costume design as well. The kind of
blue-faced,
the blue and gray tint to it. It's not like these Walking Dead, like where there's pus and goo and blood coming out of everything.
I don't need that.
Yeah, there's something still. I don't know. There's still something frightening about these zombies. I don't know. Did you guys feel that way?
Yeah, they're immediately identifiable. It almost feels like John Carpenter's design for the aliens in They Live or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you don't need all of the gore and the ooze and the guts to identify them as zombies. Kind of to come back to Nathan's point about horror trappings that are not super realistic. I think Romero does that really well here. But what were you about to say, Lydia? Sorry.
They were scary, but they were also really sad. I just felt so bad for all of the zombies. My favorite was the one that grabs the machine gun, and then if you look in the background, he's still holding it throughout the whole movie.
Doesn't know what to do with it. He just has it.
And then he gets a new one at the end, and I was so happy for him. But
it is interesting how we see a lot of the same familiar faces show up over the course of the film.
How did you guys feel also about the human characters that we're following? Because like Andrew said, you have these two cop characters and then you have these two news characters, and it's kind of funny because the cop characters seem very put together, at least for the first 30, 40-ish minutes. They're trained to deal with this kind of thing. At least they know how to shoot. They know how to shoot a gun, and they know how to go move places. While the news people are just kind of flung along. The one guy can drive can pilot the helicopter.
Flyboy,
but that's about it.
At least one of the cops is overly confident, though.
Well, he
sees himself as invincible.
He
which
starts
gets
picking.
himself
Yeah, he
screwed.
starts picking that up. But I don't think he's necessarily like that. You know, at the beginning, because I mean, he's the one who shuts down the
Right.
incredibly racist, you know, gung ho cop at the
Does
very
he?
beginning.
I kind of feel like he just lets that guy.
Well, they shoot him in the back.
Do they?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's the one who.
Okay.
shoots him in the back.
I was just thinking about the moment where the incredibly racist cop is going on his tirade and nobody really says anything.
Oh, no, they
just
don't
kind
say-
of look at their feet.
No, they don't say anything. No, whenever he's busting in that door, they shoot him, and that's how he dies.
Okay.
That's the guy. So I think he like ramps up. But that's what I'm saying. Like I think that it's kind of interesting that the dynamics of I feel like the dynamics are constantly changing. You know, different characters. I like how he gives us this core group of 4 people, and kind of their role is constantly changing and shifting. The female, the one woman character, I don't know if she's shifting as much as the other
She has a really nice scene of defiance and saying like, "I will not be your den mother."
Sure.
In the middle of this, movie.
But
Yeah.
regardless,
Yeah.
overall, I think that it's interesting that the core 4 are constantly. It's never like somebody is kind of acting the same way throughout the entire runtime. I like that they
Well,
move
they're-
the dynamic around.
Well, they're in that mall for like a really long time, too, and so you also get to see like the mini breakdown of society, like recreate. Like they try to recreate this outside society, like Andrew mentioned, like nuclear family. But I guess that's kind of inherently unstable, and as time
Yeah.
goes on, like it's unsustainable.
Eventually, they're bored out of their minds, like just sitting down and watching static on the television. Like, we need to get out of here. Which, as a little mini critique on, I guess, suburban life from George Romero in this movie.
But they also do the same thing, like Nocturama does
Yeah.
it, and kind of the critique of, they come back to the mall because they can't know any better. But they have like their whole sequence of the woman characters like trying on all the makeup, and they're like they all go around and like loot to use a charge word, but like just take things like extreme consumerism.
Yeah.
So
when they're like trying to break through the elevator and stuff like that, you'll use language from commercials like "one-stop shop, all your needs right here." Kind of as an off-topic thing, I think it's interesting that the ending of this movie is a reversal of what happens in Night of the Living Dead, where in that you have the one black male character being killed unjustifiably. Here, both of the white male characters die, and the white woman and the black man get away. I feel like this movie has more of a sense of justice to it, even though like our 2 white male characters are still good people. We're seeing a reversal of, I guess, the power dynamics of American society in the time period.
Well, it's still there is the problem of the original ending where they were supposed to kill themselves. But then it's like at the same time, maybe that is more inspirational than the ending of Night of the Living Dead, just because it's not another human taking a human's life. It's these people who are probably not going to survive taking their fate into their own hands, I guess. I don't want to sound like I'm, I don't know, putting
Cinematary is not advocating suicide.
Yeah, no, not by any means, but it's like
Disclaimer.
at least there's some kind of like autonomy in that, and like it's not
because the way
so much about people are evil. It's like now people have escaped from the shiny hell and can take charge, even if that is not the ideal choice.
You have
Well, the happy ending doesn't seem that happy either,
Yeah.
though. Like, they're not escaping to anywhere better.
They only have a little bit of gas,
Graduate,
as they
but
say.
with zombies.
Yeah.
Yes!
Well, I think that it also allows for some sense of control because you have the one character who's bitten by a zombie, and he knows exactly kind of the fate he's headed toward, and that's what he asked Peter is I don't want to be one of those those things, and so he sits there and waits so that whenever he does turn, he can immediately take him out of it, just because I think that there's some sort of there's some sort of control, at least in being able to pull the trigger in end your life that way, rather than having these things just kind of rip you apart.
Again, Cemetery is not advocating suicide.
Yeah, this is all in the context of the movie. You know, you think of like the death that one biker had, where he got shot off the bike, and then you watch as they kind of just pull his insides out. Like, it's kind of like, do you want that, or do you want the instant death? It's, you know.
Also, are there brief flashes of a swastika on that guy's jacket?
They were
that's a
Nazis.
biker thing. Yeah. I'm not. That's a Scorpio Rising. That's just motorcycle culture. Not to like write that off, but
I thought that was interesting how that was the only death that was lingered on in the movie.
Yeah. It's because Nazis are bad.
Nazis are bad. The Cemetery advocates for the badness of Nazis.
Yeah. Yeah. I was 100% thinking of that throughout the whole entire movie, because at one point they were talking about how the president and him doing something like to counteract the whole zombie thing, and I was like, imagine if we had a zombie outbreak right now. That would be just the worst case scenario, because he would not be able to come up with any solution to the zombies. He would like try to befriend the zombies, and the zombies.
There are very fine people in the zombie horde, I hear.
Yeah, so that was killing me.
Not all zombies.
Not all zombies.
I want to go back to the music part, and we kind of talked about that at the beginning. And Lydia, you were talking about that you like the kind of circus music addition to the film. What did you guys think of the music in this movie? Clearly, we were all kind of watching various different versions, and that there's, you know, like we alluded to at the beginning, there's a lot of different forms, but at least in the version that you watched, what was kind of the music like, and what did it add to especially the parts with them in the mall?
I guess what I liked about the circus music, and I guess kind of the stock music that you just hear in malls, like, it gave it a really comedic, surreal sort of atmosphere. Yeah. And I can't remember any of the goblin pieces, unfortunately. that didn't stick out as much to me.
I didn't go out looking to confirm what I thought were the goblin pieces. I just kind of assumed like, oh, there are these tracks that sound kind of prog, Pink Floyd-y, and I just assumed that was the goblin stuff. So if that is correct, I think it's interesting how the use of library music in the beginning sort of almost sets it up to the way it's filmed, set it up almost as like a TV police procedural. And you don't really see the zombies yet, and everything's just in chaos, and you're following these sort of very TV show like archetypes of the news anchors and the cops, and you're following them sort of on the job. But then once you have the Goblin soundtrack comes in, it sort of it takes it off on this sort of extension from that, and it's like, okay, no, this is not this kind of normal structured mediated world that we are familiar with. It's something off of that. It's something uncanny, and so kind of that slipping back and forth between those, I thought was interesting tonally. And like you said, Lydia, like the circus music and some of the other pieces, and some of like this on the stuff on the soundtrack where you hear the mall broadcast announcements, add this ironic tone to it, and just kind of this like thinking about zombies as a circus, just like wandering around this enclosed space, like circus performers, just or like a carousel, just going around and around,
or down the up escalator.
Yeah, I think is sort of just this like fitting, ironic commentary. I don't know. I like the way that this movie is funny. It's not like it's in a way that's both sort of ironic and tongue in cheek and poking fun at commercial culture, but it's also like really physical too.
Does anyone enjoy the Goblin score as much as they do in Suspiria?
No, it's not as overwhelming, because like what's so good in Suspiria is it like knocks you over, and I don't think that happened.
It's the driving force of the movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah. as we kind of wrap up and I want to do closing thoughts in this kind of form where it seemed like everybody really responded highly to this movie. I think everybody really, really liked it. So kind of as closing thoughts, I'm curious, to you, what did you respond most to about this movie? What made Dawn of the Dead so great in your eyes that you just kind of saw this as this immediate, this is a 4.5, 5-star movie?
Lydia. There's nothing wrong with the boring horror moral as long as they do it in a good way, which I think this does.
Yeah.
For me, it was a combination of three things. First, you've got that sweet anti-capitalist commentary that I'm always a big sucker for. Anything that I can project my lefty politics on, I'm a fan of. Mixed with that, like I mentioned, that sort of almost poignant, ironic, but also physical body humor. And then finally, this just like really taut, formal precision. Just the framing is just so like angular, and I love movies that use these kind of liminal spaces and really, I don't know, I guess like visually investigate them and are able to make something really beautiful out of spaces that we're supposed to ignore and not think about structurally.
Mm-hmm.
I go back to Lydia's point that she made when we were talking about Die Hard last December, which is that movie is a fun foundational text that people built off of and expanded outwards into many different genres and subgenres. The same is true for the two Romero movies I've seen. I've only seen Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, so I can't necessarily speak to Romero as a whole, but both of those movies are just so obviously stone cold classics that have served as the foundation for, huge swaths of American cinema. And I think that Dawn of the Dead is my favorite of those two, and in a lot of ways it's this American horror epic that encompasses, like I said, a lot of different aspects of American culture, while staying true to conventions of genre and like being a titillating piece of entertainment. And I did not feel that the epic runtime was a detriment to the movie in the same way that Blade Runner 2049 was a huge detriment to the movie.
Everything is just a coded Blade Runner disc.
I thought that the 2 hours and 20 minutes, this thing that I watched, really cooked from beginning to end. And I would recommend this to anybody who, maybe if you're not even that seasoned of a horror fan.
Oh, this would be a great place to start.
Yeah, this is a good entry level film. But I'm seeing this for the first time, having watched well over 100 horror movies, and I was still kind of blown away by this thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it really does have this deep foundational quality to it. It seems. I think that you if you watch it today, you kind of can see and feel the cliches in it, but that's just because it was made. It was the first one. It kind of We've talked about this a number of times before with these kind of foundational movies that we've watched. But I think that again, a lot of the points that you guys have made, it bears itself being this seminal work. It's very well constructed. I think that it's a very smart movie, but it's also deeply entertaining. You have these kind of long, it's incredibly entertaining to watch the rednecks just shoot zombies with glee. That's all they've ever asked for in their lives. And so, I think that it definitely makes me want to dig more into Romero's work. I think that this is a great point to start at, and I understand why this is an entry for a lot of people into horror and genre and a number of other avenues. I think that this carries a lot of great qualities, and I think that it's a fantastic film. But yeah, I guess that'll wrap things up. You can find Cinematary online. We're at Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, at Twitter at @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all of the episodes that we talked about today.
All the movies we talked about today. Not all the episodes we talked about today.
I think we talked about a lot of episodes as well. And on the next episode, we will be continuing our October horror series with 1992's Candyman.
We're going to record that immediately after this. So if anything monumental happens in the film world between now and next week, we just haven't heard about it.
Yeah, it's just so because we're usually the ones who have to come in and make a comment on it.
Harvey Weinstein's a bad person.
All right, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.